The chair is calling the regular meeting of the Executive Committee on Monday, July 18th, 2024, McLean County Board. And we have, I'm sorry, 7 members present. In place of Member Lehman, we have Member Solner. And we have a quorum, and we can conduct business. May I have a motion to approve the consent agenda, which is also including the meeting minutes and bills and transfers? May I have a motion? We have a motion by Vice Chair Johnston and a second by by Chair Klein. Any discussion? All in favor of the consent agenda, say aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion passes. Do we have any members, appearances from members of the public or county employees?
Chair Metzger, we've had no requests for this meeting.
Very good. We will move to department matters, and we have Elizabeth Johnson, and she is going to do the executive committee. And the floor is yours.
Thank you. Executive Committee has 2 items for action to be presented. The first item is 4A1C. This is request approval of a resolution of McLean County Board authorizing McLean County Information Technologies to enter into an agreement with Carasoft Technology Corporation in closed session if requested pursuant to 5 ILCS 120/2C8 under security procedures, school building safety and security, and the use of personnel and equipment to respond to an actual, a threatened, or a reasonably potential danger to the safety of employees, students, staff, the public, or public property. And I so move.
So we are moving for the motion to consider, not necessarily closed session at this point.
That's correct.
So may I have a second? And we have a second by Rogao. And do we need to go into closed session? Do we need to have discussion? Any discussion will have to go into closed session.
I'd like to have a closed session.
All right. So we have a motion to go into closed session by Member Erickson. And I need a second for that. We have a second by Schaefer. And I guess is Julie is here. And we're going into closed session, so we will need to, oh, I'm sorry. I have all in favor of going into closed session, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Now we can go into closed session. Julie will keep us straight. Thank you very much. We will need everyone to leave except those individuals who are responsible from the board members and the administration, and those individuals who are responsible for this action item from Information Technologies. Thank you. We have returned from closed session, so we are going to hand it back to Ms. Johnson. We do have a motion for the authorization for the agreement from Vice Chair Johnston and a second by Rogal. So all in favor of the agreement with Carasoft Technologies, say aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion passes. And you have the floor again, Ms. Johnson.
Thank you. Next item is for a 4A1D, and that is request approval of an ordinance of the McLean County Board amending Chapter 12 of the McLean County Code and establishing a Mental Health and Public Safety Fund Advisory Council, and I so move.
So we have a motion by Johnston and second by Schaefer. And discussion.
Yes, I would like to, I think that there was a lot of clarifications in this from the last version, but I did come across one section in 1242, specifically highlighting the BHCC, the membership and voting rights. And I'd just like to make an amendment to add in 12-42A, the second sentence, to extend that with as a voting member, so that each of the following units of government shall be entitled to appoint one representative as a voting member. And then to clarify in 12-42B, that at the last sentence, the total number of voting BHCC members under Section B shall not exceed 16, to clarify that by mentioning BHCC agency members.
All right, we have a motion.
Sure. In 12-42B, the last sentence, where it mentions how many voting members, it shall not exceed 16. Given A and B together, that's 18 total. So the clarification would be that under agency representation, the agency representatives will not exceed 16 as voting members. So it just, the total number of voting BHCC agency members under Section B shall not exceed 16.
So we will need a second to that motion. We have a second by Rogal.
Just a point of clarification, we're going to do, I have a couple of changes as well. We're doing
Oh.
this at a time. One at a time. Okay.
Yep.
I guess we probably need to,
The lawyer says one at a time.
yeah, that's what I was going to say. I think we would need to address these individually and vote on them individually, and then, depending on the outcome, then we will vote on
The item as a whole.
on the item. So, so the motion, we have a motion by Johnston on the amendment on voting on, that's 12. Sorry. 12-42. And we have a second, and that was Rogal. Thank you, I'm sorry. All right, is there discussion needed for that? All in favor of that amendment to 12-42, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion passes. All right, so now, Chairman Klein.
Okay, I have one that's sort of a question and one that I think is just a vocabulary issue. So on chapter 1241, A1, it is written, review and recommend updates to the McLean County Mental Health Action Plan. To whom are they making those recommendations?
To the county board.
Does that need to be clarified? Because we have the FAC as well. So it's not clear to me, and it's made clear in other sections that the BHCC is not a subsidiary of the county board and is not reporting to the county board. So it's not immediately clear to me that when they're making a recommendation, that they're making a recommendation to the county board. So is it to the health department? Is it to the health committee? Is it to the executive committee? That's sort of my question, is if they're making recommendations for a change in the mental health action plan, to whom are they making that recommendation?
So your motion then, you're recommending a motion,
No,
or you're
this
just
is
asking a
I
question?
don't know the answer to that. I mean, I feel like it needs to be clarified, but I don't know the answer to whom are they actually making their recommendations for the changes to the mental health action plan.
To the county board, but Ms. Schaefer?
Well, I kind of read it as review and recommend updates to the McLean County Mental Health Action Plan would be to make those that the plan should be updated and reviewed what's been done to our Director of Behavioral Health Coordination. That's how I read it. Not to the county board necessarily, but more to that, and that's the person that puts together all of those changes and recommendations that would be done. And there, you know.
Could you make I mean, the reason I asked the question is because it's not clear to me to whom it should
Yeah,
go.
that's
So
what-
if that's the person, I'm not making any kind of claim that I have an answer to who it should go to, but I feel as though it needs to be clarified. So if,
And I think Ms. Schaefer is correct. Ultimately, it goes to the county board, but that recommendation comes from the head of behavioral health.
so do you have verbiage that would make that appropriate? If you want a minute, I have something that's very easy, the other one, if you want a minute to think about that.
Well, I don't know if that would be actually something that would be in bylaws that BHCC would write as to what that process is on that. This is discussion.
Sure.
I just trying to, unless you have
So you're saying
something.
that the BHCC should decide for themselves where their recommendations should go? Is that what you're saying?
No, I guess maybe that on the process on how they operate. I'm not sure. But I'd be willing to listen to your suggestion here.
Well, I don't have a suggestion. I said I have one other, like, a single word change, but if you needed a minute to think about it.
Would we want to, and I'm just throwing this out, I'm not making a motion, I'm throwing this out, that somebody could make a motion that could potentially to review and recommend updates to the Director of Behavioral Health, or same thing, the Executive Committee. I'm not sure which. I think it really should go to I believe it should go to the Director of Behavioral Health. And I'm making a note that Member Friedrich has joined us.
If I could just make a clarification for myself, Chairperson Metzger. So review and recommend updates to, is this a periodic update to? Like, is this an interstitial update to, or is this the sort of, because we redo the mental health action plan every 3 years, right? So are we talking about this every 3-year process, or are we talking about midstream changes if they have a change that they need? Like we change in our bylaws when we have need of a change.
It would be the every 3 years.
Just on the every 3 years?
Yeah, we don't make those updates. If I'm not mistaken, correct me, Ms. Schaefer, but I don't believe we make updates to that except on a 3-year cycle.
Okay, so that's fine. So I mean, that might be clarified as well to say that, in the revision, which is every 3 years, because the way it's written, review and recommend updates, you could say review and recommend updates every 3 years, or for the because right now it sounds sort of like, A, I don't know who I'm supposed to tell, and B, I don't know if this is a revolving issue. If I come to them and say, I think we need to make a change midstream, that we could do that. So it's not clear the timing or the point of delivery.
So you're saying review and recommend updates every 3 years to the mental health action plan. These updates are then directed to or sent to the Director of Behavioral Health. mean, that,
The right answer.
we'll have to get the wording, but that's kind of what you're wanting, right?
Something in that neighborhood. Something in that neighborhood, yes.
I think our county administrator had a comment.
Thank you, Chair Metzger. So I guess my question to this group is, who do you want to own the mental health action plan? And so in the past, it has come to the McLean County Board for a vote. So if we're changing this to something other than the executive committee, which is where it currently comes back to, and then the full board, then that is fine. It's just making a change of who owns that document, and that would be the BHCC, that then would be making recommendations to the Director of Behavioral Health. The second part of that with the 3 years, that is what the current BHCC membership has agreed upon as the cycle that they will be reviewing that plan. But I don't know with policy how specific we want to get into that language, because there might be times when it is necessary to do it every 2 years, or if you've got a stable plan that has long-term goals, maybe 4 years. So I'm not as concerned with the 3-year determination, because I do think that that is something that would be spelled out in the BHCC bylaws, that the BHCC membership would agree upon, or it would be something that they decide on as a council.
Sure.
But I do think you bring up a good point of who do you want to own the mental health action plan?
Thank you for that. I mean, I didn't know it was every 3 years, so I don't really have a skin in the game in terms of the number of years, but would it be better to state this item as to work with the behavioral health coordinator to revise and recommend updates to? That is to say that they're part of the process with that individual, and then that the behavioral health coordinator is the one who then brings that to the board, right, for review?
Currently, it is the Director of Behavioral Health Coordination that brings it to the board after it has been adopted by that BHCC or recommended for review by the board, by that body. And again, it just goes to who do you want to own it. So I don't know that you need to mention the Director of Behavioral Health Coordination at all unless she is the one to be receiving this information.
Okay. Sure. So who do we want to own the behavioral health action plan? The BHCC can't own the action plan, I would think, because, I mean, if it's theirs, then they just update, they review and update the action plan if it's theirs. Right, they don't recommend updates, they would just update it if it's theirs, if they own it. If you're saying the BHCC owns the mental health action plan, then that wording is inaccurate. Even if the mental health action plan has to be then approved and enacted by the county board, they own the plan. I don't have an answer. I think that this is a problem, this first one.
Member Solner.
So I don't want the county board to lose any authority or power, but I don't believe the county board could own the plan, because then we could make changes to the plan without having any information, or I may not like the word blue in it, and I could vote to pass that. So I think it needs to belong to the BHCC, but I just want to make sure, and by reading this, there's a whole list of things that that group cannot do. And I wanted to make sure that those are in there as far as funding, final decisions. But I believe that the county board can't own it. I believe it needs to be somebody else.
Member Erickson.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know where I'm coming out on this. I mean, I don't want to see the county board lose any authority or any power in that. Are we losing power by changing that, or am I just mistaken? I am mistaken? Okay.
Who owns it now? I mean, who's responsible for it now, the BHCC? the board. Right now, the county board is,
The board approved it.
but they didn't write it.
They did not write it. BHCC and members of the BHCC created it, made those updates, and brought it to the county board.
Completed.
Complete. Correct.
So it seems to me if that's the case and we want that not to change,
I mean, there were changes that were made, I believe, weren't there last time, Susan? Member Schaefer?
Yeah, I compiled a lot of information from those people, but then it was the Director of Behavioral Health Coordination that took all of that after it was all compiled, and then edited numerous times and things like that to get the final product. So it did, go through that person.
So iterations went through the director.
There were numerous iterations of the whole thing. But the actual, like I said, it actually was finished by the Director of Behavioral Health Coordination at
And
the
then
time,
approved by the county board.
and then approved by the county board. Well, it also got approved by BHCC before it came to the county board.
I mean, it could be something that we say, review and update the McLean County Mental Health Action Plan and render to the county board for final approval or something like that, right? I mean, so that gives authorship. I mean, I assume that the county board votes on it because there's money involved. There's taxpayer money involved, right?
That's what this other thing is.
Okay. So if there's no money involved anymore, because there was money involved before, if there's no money involved any longer, then and the FAC is just dealing with the money, then maybe we don't need, the county board doesn't need to have authority because there's no taxpayer money involved. But the FAC does have the taxpayer money.
Ms. Taylor?
So I think it might be helpful for me to explain the workflow or the business process flow for how this happens. And so the advisory council, as it stands now, has been making recommendations on the community, on what they think are priorities in the community. They've put this into a mental health action plan that's over 100 pages long. That has, as it currently stands, is at the behest of the chairman of the board. And so this ordinance would then separate out the BHCC membership as well as their powers and duties as an independent body from the county board. They still would be making updates to the mental health action plan that is for the community as a whole. And then the funding advisory council, the FAC, would be making decisions about the shared sales tax, which is only one source of funding for all of these community behavioral health efforts. We also have grants, we also have community agencies that have budgets. We have donations, there's all kinds of funding sources for the efforts of the community to make systemic change in mental health for a community. So I think you could have them separate. The county board would be losing some control over what those priorities were in the mental health action plan. But if it is truly a community plan, then it could live with the BHCC without being directed back to the county board.
May I ask a follow-up? So then, the FAC, so the BHCC creates their plan based on, these are all the agencies, these are the people who are interacting with human beings and are in the field, and they're creating a plan that essentially reflects the current state of affairs and the needs and the concerns that they have for the community. The FAC that can then weigh those, so even if the Behavioral Health Coordinating Council has on their report a certain series of recommendations, the FAC can make different funding decisions if they want. Is that correct? They're not bound to the plan. The plan is a reflection of what is happening on the ground, and the FAC can make decisions about what they as a kind of combined board with the county, the town, the city, and the, you know, the people from corrections, they could essentially not override it, but essentially make slightly different prioritizations and things like that.
I think they would still stick to the priorities of the mental health action plan because that's part of our intergovernmental agreement with the city and the town, but they could decide which priorities are weighed more, or if there are a lack of priorities given, they could help decide where they want those funding streams to go.
So just as a scenario, we have a 3-year cycle for our mental health action plan. Something happens midstream, year 2 or something like that, that becomes an immediate serious problem. And there's an opportunity to, you know, open a center or a treatment facility or something like that in order to handle this unforeseen issue. Would the fact be able to do that is to say they would be able to make a decision independent of the action plan, given that sort of the needs on the ground could change? Are they enabled to do that? May not be our preferred method, but are they enabled to do that? And
Please.
Thank you. I think that the mental health action plan has enough, it's an umbrella plan, and we do want to see more specific. It's a very broad plan. And so there's a need on the ground. I think that they would be able to kind of find some hook underneath one of the categories to be able to apply it. It doesn't have to be specifically outlined, because not all of the programs that are being run that fit and that hold to the mental health action plan are specifically outlined. But if it's something that can fall into one of those categories in some way, I think that there's a way that they can hook it into the current mental health action plan and then to update. But we're talking about like the BHCC, I mean, the establishment and the purpose is that it shall not be required to report to the county board. So what we're talking about is a council that's going to support the operations of our behavioral health kind of department, right, under our director. And I don't think that there's any other department that we have that is kind of like scrutinized to this extent, where we were micromanaging like their plan of action. And so I would feel very comfortable with this plan, particularly because the money, any money that we have that would be expended would still come through us. We wouldn't lose that power. But if we want to structure this so that this Behavioral Health Coordinating Council submits their report to the director of the BHCC, then I would feel very comfortable with that and allowing them to kind of run their area with this guidance. And then the funding piece would still be through the checks and balances.
right, my question wasn't born of my unease about losing control, but for those who might be considering that it would make us lose control, I wanted to kind of clarify that this is just a plan in the sense that the county still, the FAC is where the money is, and the FAC is under our control in that sense, right? So it wasn't really born of an anxiety on my part, but just sort of when you say, are we losing control? It sounds to me that this is a report, this is, you know, I've read, you know, the last 2 versions of it, but this is something that's put together by our community to then be considered, you know, using as a framework for how we make decisions going forward. It's not the decisions. The report isn't the decision. The report is just a report. Okay, so I will make a motion to say review and update the McLean County Mental Health Action Plan and submit to the Director of Behavioral Health.
Did you have another change that we can pull into this?
Yeah, it's super simple. I'm talking about Chapter 1241A2, facilitate conversations regarding differences of opinion about aspects of the community's behavioral health system among its stakeholders, not between, but it should be among. Grammatically, this is
Right. I think that could be a,
two, it's among instead of between, it's between 2 people, among is.
we'll just leave it. Okay, so those 2 changes. Do I have a second to that? We have a second by Rogel. So hang on, I need to, and that was 1241. 41, and we have Klein made the motion, and Rogal seconded that motion. We've had a lot of discussion, but do we have more discussion? Member Schaefer?
When we added this, and to submit to the Director of Behavioral Health, it should say Behavioral Health Coordination.
Oh,
Okay, I just want to make sure that that's what you
a
meant.
friendly amendment,
That's, yes.
thank you. Chair Erickson?
I don't know whether I'm opposed to this or in favor of it, but I just want to make sure I check out the language, so I'll be voting no at the present time until I have time to ask more questions about it.
All right. Any other? So we are voting on the motion for 1241, and that will read review and recommend updates, review and update. Sorry. Review and update the behavioral health, the McLean County Mental Health Action Plan, and submit to the Director of Behavioral Health Coordination. Then in 2, the word between becomes among. All in favor of that motion, say aye. Opposed? So we have one, the motion passes, one opposition, and the motion passes. Any other? Okay. And Chair Schaefer?
I mentioned this to Mr. Sierra before the meeting. On page 13, on 1252B, at the end of that sentence, the factual blah, 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 available from the county mental health and it should say public safety fund. A safety fund needs to be added into that sense.
So is that a correction, or is that, I don't think we need to vote on that. That was just an omission, wasn't it? It was an omission, and it will be corrected.
Okay.
So we're not going to have to make a motion for
Thank
that
you.
one. All right. And I think, I thought I saw another hand. Vice Chair?
I was just motioning to Chair Schaefer. That's all.
Okay, all right. So that one, we're okay. Any other questions? Seeing none, we are going to be voting on the motion for, Scott, wait a minute. So now we are going to vote for acceptance of the entire change to Chapter 12 of the McLean County Board related to the Behavioral Health Coordinating Council. That includes those 2 amended changes that we voted on just before. All in favor of the Behavioral Health Coordinating Council ordinance, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. And that motion passes with 1 nay. And the floor is yours again.
Thank you. Executive has no other items, and I'm happy to pass it back to you, Chair.
So we will move to 4B, and that is the Finance Committee, and we have Chairman Bill Friedrich, and the floor is yours, Chair Friedrich.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Finance Committee brings no action items. We will be bringing 6 items to the full board. And I have no other information or nothing else to present. I yield back. Thank you.
Thank you. We will move to Health Committee 4C, and we have Chairman Susan Schaefer.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Health Committee has 1 item for action today. 4C1A is approval of emergency appropriation ordinance for Fund 112-6164, and I so move.
And may I have a second? We have a second by, we have a motion by Schaefer and a second by Johnston. Any discussion, questions? All in favor of the emergency appropriation for Fund 0112-0016-0064, say aye. Opposed? That motion passes. The floor is again yours, Chairman Schaefer.
Thank you. That is all we have today, and we will have no other items other than that one for the board.
Thank you. We will move to Justice Committee for D, and our chairman is Chuck Erickson.
Thank you, Chair. The Justice Committee brings 4 items for action. First item is item 4D1A, request approval of a violent crime victims assistance program grant agreement, grant 25-1070. And I so move.
We have a motion by Chair Erickson, and we have a second by Chair Klein. And are there any comments, or is there discussion needed? Seeing none, all in favor of the Violent Crimes Victims Assistance Program grant agreement, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion passes, and you have the floor again, Chairman Erickson.
Thank you. Next item is item 4D1B, request approval of a grant agreement between Children's Advocacy Centers of Illinois and McLean County CAC number 222003, and I so move.
And I need a second. We have a second by Chair Friedrich. Discussion or questions? Seeing none, all in favor of the grant agreement between the Children's Advocacy Center of Illinois and McLean County CAC, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion passes, and Member Erickson, you have the floor again.
Thank you, Chair. Next item for action is item 4D1C, request approval of an emergency appropriation ordinance amending the McLean County fiscal year 2024 combined annual appropriation and budget ordinance for Metcom Fund 0452, and I so move.
And I need a second. We have a second by Chairman Schaefer. Questions? Seeing none, all in favor of the emergency appropriation for Metcom Fund 0412, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion passes, and you have the floor again, Chair Erickson.
Thank you. Last item for action is item 4D1D, request approval of an emergency appropriation ordinance amending the McLean County fiscal year 2024 combined annual appropriation and budget ordinance for Fund 0450, and I so move.
And I need a second. We have a second by Vice Chair Johnston. Questions? No discussion? All in favor of the emergency appropriation for the Fund 0450, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion passes. And Chairman Erickson, you have the floor again.
Thank you, Chair. The Justice Committee has no other items for action, and we have 2 additional items to present to the board. Thank you.
We will move to 4E, and that is Property Committee. And I believe our Vice Chair is here, Jim Solner. So, Vice Chair Solner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Property Committee has 2 items. The first one is E1A, request approval of a grant agreement between the State of Illinois Environmental Protection Agency and McLean County. It's for $200,000 for energy upgrades and the Community Energy Strategic Plan, and I would make that motion.
I need a second. We have a second by Member Rogao, or Chairman Rogao. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the grant agreement between the State of Illinois Environmental Protection Agency and McLean County, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion passes, and Vice Chair Solner, you have the floor again.
Next item is 4E1B, request approval of an ordinance approving an amendment to the lease agreement between the Public Building Commission of McLean County and the county, and providing for the levy and collection of taxes to pay the rent due under the amended lease agreement, and I so move.
And I need a second. We have a second by Vice Chair Johnston. Any discussion? Everybody wants to pay the rent? Very good. All in favor of paying the rent for the amended lease agreement, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion passes, and you have the floor again, Vice Chair Solner.
That's all that the property committee has today. There'll be at least one item presented to the board. I try to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. We are moving to 4F, and that's Land Use and Development Committee, and Chair Leah Klein.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. The Land Use and Development Committee has no items for action this evening, although we do have one item to present to the board on Thursday, and I would be happy to answer any questions that people might have.
Anything more for Chair Klein? We will move to 4G, and that's Transportation Committee, and that's Chairman Jim Rogal. And Chair Rogal, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Transportation Committee has no items to be presented for action tonight, but we will have 4 items to be presented to the board on Thursday. I can answer any questions if anyone has any.
Anything for Chair Rogal? All right. 4H, and that's County Administrator Cassie Taylor. And Ms. Taylor, you have a few things that you need to, we have one item for action, and it is request approval of a resolution for the July 2nd, 2024 project letting to resurface the west parking lot of the Law and Justice Center, and that's sections 24-00600-05-RS. May I have a motion for that? We have a motion by Member Friedrich, Chair Friedrich, and we have a second by Chair Schaefer. And any questions for Ms. Taylor? Seeing none, that's a short one for you, Ms. Taylor. All in favor of the project letting for the west parking lot, say aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion passes. And Ms. Taylor, anything else?
I do not have any items to be presented to the board. I do have a couple of comments to make as far as information goes. One is to remind you to get your RSVPs in for next Tuesday for the animal control shelter ribbon cutting. And the second is just to inform this committee that we will be completing our bond rating call tomorrow with Moody's in an effort to refinance the bonds from the Law and Justice Center expansion back in 2015.
You have a question, Vice Chair Johnston?
Yeah, regarding that, I think that that is part of what's attached to what we just passed with property for the Public Building Commission. And the information in the packet talked about kind of assumed or kind of like expected amount of savings. Once this project is, if we're able to do it and we're able to save as much as they think or hope, is there any way that when they can come back to us and let us know how that process went and how we've improved things for the taxpayers? Because that's a lot of money they're talking about saving.
Yes, I'm certain that PMA would be willing to come back and give a recap of the process.
Thank you.
Any other business or communications? Seeing none, our next meeting is August 12th, and thank you very much. We will see you on Thursday.